Welcome to the Close Encounter Club. I'm your host, Justin Gearhart. I first came across today's guest on Reddit, where she goes by the name ForbiddenSnackie's. She shares her experiences there with a rare kind of openness and detail, and something about her post really stood out to me. So, I reached out to her, even though she wanted to remain anonymous. I was a little skeptical at first, but something kept nudging me to have this conversation, and I'm glad that I did. Her story begins not with a single incident, but with a lifetime of encounters, memories, and strange experiences that have surfaced piece by piece, year after year. From early childhood drawings of purple aliens with suction cups, to vivid onboard memories of being taught star navigation through interactive telepathic games, ForbiddenSnackie's invites us into a reality where contact isn't just a moment, it's a relationship. What she shared with me was unlike anything I've heard before, yet strangely familiar. Her experiences echo so much of what we heard from Jeff Selver in the Rising series. The parallels are hard to ignore. That said, this story is very powerful and deeply human. This is episode 12, The Night Family, and you're listening to the Close Encounter Club.
Hi everyone, I'm ForbiddenSnackie's. I post, I think, exclusively on Reddit right now. When I talk about like my experiences and things that I've encountered and like the distinct kinds of sensations and impressions I get. But more close to heart, like the person that I am. One of my hobbies is actually writing. Never published anything, but I've liked writing since I was a little kid. And when I was a kid, I thought it was like the perfect job because I'm like, oh my gosh, like I can do what I want and like work my own hours and do something I love. Because when I was very little, what I really loved was telling stories to others in the same way that, like, at least the way I saw it as a kid, like the way people would tell stories around a fire, some of them would be based on things that happened or, it was oral history. And other times it would be, stories to depict things in life through metaphor or through symbolism. And I thought that was really just a beautiful thing about like society itself, even if that had become books and movies and whatnot. So that's something that I've always really kind of held close to my heart. And I think it's influenced my ability to honestly narrate and describe the things that have happened to me. Because when I was a kid, I was like, I've got to get good at like writing in English because like that is like the backbone of a writer and I can't draw. Like, when I was a little kid, I was like, I have no drawing ability. Like, I need to go all in on like grammar. So yes, that's a little tidbit about me. So like when I was very young, my family was, I believe, in Mormonism, and that like hugely influenced my beliefs. Because like, my parents talk about God and all the ghosts and how they were like omnipotent. And that made me very God-fearing because I'm like, oh my gosh, God knows when I'm mad at my mom and he doesn't like it. Outside of that, like at least in the church beliefs that I was around, we spoke about ghosts and like, miracles that happened and how the Holy Ghost would warn you of things sometimes. So in that sense, like I was a little bit accustomed to like premonitions and like ghost adjacent paranormal activity. About aliens, like I had this fascination with them when I was a kid. Like I loved reading stories about them. And I was always curious to see how people would draw them because I would think to myself, oh, well, if someone draws them this way, maybe they exist out there like that somehow. Like maybe every depiction is like a truth in some way. And for a while I would ask my mom and she would say, oh, well, like the universe is a big place and God created all kinds of life. And I'd be like, that means there's aliens. Like my confirmation. I guess I was approaching the topic, at least knew about the topic in a very kind of like naive way. I remember when I was like in third grade, I went to the school library and I tried to find any books that had like a mention of aliens. Which is funny because if you had like seen me a year or two prior to that, like I was doing like everything dinosaurs. Like I was fascinated with all these dead things that didn't exist anymore. It's like, whoa, like this world used to be whoa. And then I was like, oh no, now I need to figure out what else is out there, what's still alive. And I found this like really really funny book about Roswell. It was like for kids. Like it had like maybe like 60 pages. And it was like, oh yeah, people say Roswell was a crash. But the government doesn't say anything like that. So it's probably a lot of hearsay. But there may be aliens out there somewhere. They just definitely haven't crashed in New Mexico. Like, it was such a funny book. And I'm like, is it or isn't it? Like, I know there's a narrative in this book, but like, can't seem to agree with itself. I think I saw another one, same author, that was like about Bigfoot or something. And so I tried to find whatever I could as a kid, and I really couldn't find anything. It was always like third and fourth hand, like adjacent descriptions or analysis of like experience or happenings. Like I didn't know about Betty and Barney Hill until I was like, 19, I think, when I like stumbled upon it on the internet. I was like, oh, so yeah. Really didn't know much about it. I was just very optimistic, very excited to meet aliens.
That's pretty awesome that you were like that self-aware when you were a child. I think when I was that age, I just didn't even think about it as much as it sounds like you did.
Well, I mean, like I would make drawings about aliens, and I think that might have been like my very early experiences, like peeking through. So I remember I drew this drawing of like this purple alien with black eyes, and the stars were behind the alien in the picture. In fact, you couldn't see anything but stars behind it. I remember my mom, I was like, Mom, I drew an alien. She was like, oh, that's cool. And so like, then I like show it to her. And in my drawing, the alien had like 3 fingers, I think, 3 or 4. And then suddenly my mom got very serious. And she was like, what do you remember? And I was like, well, I don't remember anything. This is just an alien. She's like, why is it purple? And I'm like, because purple is my favorite color. And like, I already drew one that was green. Like, got to do it different. From that moment on, I got the sense that whatever it was that my mom was asking me about was something that she wouldn't normally talk about, but something that was really happening. Because then she asked me, because I had drawn these like little suction cups on the fingers of the alien in the kid's drawing. She's like, what are these? I'm like, oh, well, those are suction cups. And she was like, what? I was like, yeah, like the aliens have suction cups so they can pick up things without nails and stuff. And she was like, what? Like, there were these elements that confused her a lot, but she was definitely intrigued. And so she asked me, she was like, why are there stars in the background? And I was like, oh, because the alien is waving from space. And she's like, space? And I'm like, yeah, like the alien is waving from their ship. And she's like, you didn't draw the ship. I'm like, yeah, I drew the window to space. But she was asking all of these interesting questions.
And how old were you at that time?
Actually, I read that drawing in like 3rd grade. So I think I was like, I'm actually terrible at remembering my ages when I was in grades, but I was like the appropriate age or slightly younger.
Okay.
I wasn't like the youngest kid ever, but it was already something that I would think about and like make things about and like make little stories about too. One thing that really stood out to me, which crazy detail that showed up then. So my mom asked me, she was like, oh, well, how do the aliens speak? Because I drew a gesture of it waving high. And I was like, oh, well, they speak, but they don't use words. You just know what they're saying. And she was like, oh, yeah? I was like, yeah, like they don't say things. You just understand them. And like, it's crazy because like way later in my life when I actually start remembering things, I'm like, oh, yeah, like a kid's description of telepathy. Mm-hmm.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
Did you ever see one of those therapists that like hypnotize you? I forget the name of them.
Hypnotherapists. I think I went once. I might have gone twice. Oh, right. I actually did like self-guided like hypnosis things once, and then I went to a hypnotherapist once.
You did? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
When was the first realization that, I mean, it sounds like you had a lot of experiences as a child, but you kind of blocked them out, for lack of a better phrase. So do you have an event or an experience that happened that, for lack of a better phrase, was like an oh shit moment that you could recall?
I technically had 2 or 3 of them. Because I remember, I think it was like a year or 2 after that like experience where I was in 3rd grade and I was like drawing these aliens. I remember there's 2 different events now I think about it. This is interesting because one event I mostly forgot about and the other one I never forgot. So the one I mostly forgot about was that one night, me and my family was late at night, but we were all up because we're a bunch of night owls. And so it's getting late and we all should be going to bed, and we start to. And then my mom actually it's my brother that shows up first, my oldest brother. He's like, hey, everyone, like come into the living room. And we get there and my mom is there and she's the one who sent us to get everyone. And all the lights are dark. we're all acting like we're asleep, at least from the outside. My mom was like, everyone, like, we need to like come and sit in the same room and be quiet. And she seemed really nervous, and I didn't know what was going on. So I was like, oh, okay. And she's like, everyone be quiet, like, don't move, don't say anything. And so as she's saying that, and we go and sit in this room that's on the second floor of the house. It's a bedroom. We're all sitting and listening in the darkness. And as we watch, we hear the sound of a helicopter, and a helicopter is flying around nearby. And as we're sitting there in the darkness, the helicopter shines its light onto the building. And so it's shining through the windows. Nothing seems to see us, but it's a very strange thing to see like random helicopters show up and really basically shining a searchlight on where you live and seeming to look for something. And so like maybe I would say like anywhere from 10 to 30 minutes of that happening, dead silence, just listening, helicopter flies away. And so then we're all kind of sitting there wondering what to do. And I was like, okay, like everything's fine. Everyone can go to bed. I was like, okay, like that's weird. But the other event that happened, and this is the thing that I never forgot, is that it was a different night. Well, everyone was up because we're night owls. It wasn't quite bedtime yet, but it was dark. It was late at night. And so everyone's kind of doing their own thing. The lights are on. My siblings are going to different rooms of the house. I'm going to different rooms of the house. We already had dinner, so we're just up. So I'm hanging out with my mom in the living room, and I'm like, Mom, are you okay? Because she seems to be feeling ill. And that happened times like that year and like the year prior and the year after. And so I was like, are you okay? And she's like, yeah, I think I'm all right. And I'm like, are you sure? You look really serious all of a sudden. I remember in this moment, I started to feel kind of like nervous anxiety. And it was because at that age, when I was a kid and around events like this, I would get the sense that something was near my house and I could feel it. And so whenever I would feel it in proximity, it would give me this nervous excitement. And so I was asking her, I was like, are you okay? Are you okay? And she's like, yeah, I think I'm fine. I'm like, Mom, they're near. I know they're near. And I didn't know exactly what I was referring to, but I know it had happened before. I knew I recognized this. She looks at me and she's like, yeah, I know. She's like, one of them is speaking to me. And I'm like, whoa. And then I was like, well, is there anything we need to do? And she's like, no, it's fine. She's like, you can just do whatever. Like, it's a normal night. And I was like, okay. She was seeming pretty serious, but I was like, okay, that's my mom. So I started nervously pacing the house because like, usually when I sensed this thing nearby, it meant things were going to happen, that something was going to happen or something needed to be done, like some kind of action. So I was like nervously pacing the house because I'm like, why am I just feeling it nearby? Why isn't anything happening? Like, this is so weird. I like pace up to the second floor, pace down to the first floor, pace down to the basement. Like I'm seeing all my siblings. They're like, oh, yo, what's up? None of my siblings seemed to sense this thing the way that I did. I didn't really tell them anything. So I'm like going upstairs from the basement, and at the top of the stairs to the basement, it was like a spiral staircase. You could look outside into the backyard. And there was a window at the top of the stairs. So I get to the top of the stairs, and I look out the window. And this is the second time I looked out the window that night. But I'm looking out, and I see something sitting in the field behind the house. Now, we had a backyard, but there was an abandoned lot next to our house, and there was a field there. And as I looked at it, and I got focused in on it, I realized that it was a very lanky humanoid sitting in the grass. And I immediately became terrified. I was like, oh my God, like that's wonderful. So I ran downstairs, went to my older brother, and I was like, oh my gosh. He's like, what, why are you freaking out? I'm like, well, one of them is in the field outside. And he's like, what? I was like, go look, it's outside. And he was like, kind of looked at me. He went up to the top of the stairs. He looked down to the yard, didn't say anything because I was watching him from the bottom of the stairs. He came back down. He looked at me and he's like, it's going to be okay. And I was like, but it's there. Like, it's so close to the house. And he was like, it's going to be fine. You just need to relax. And I was like, but you saw it. You know what's there. And he's like, I know what's there. Gonna be okay. Nothing's gonna happen. Gonna be fine. And I kind of nervously paced the house a bit, but I didn't want to look at it again. So even though I went up the stairs, I didn't look out the window. And it was because in the moment that I saw it and recognized it, I felt it was watching me. I felt that it knew I saw it and it was looking back at me. and it was sitting in this field. And so I was like, whoa. And so that's the only thing that really happened that night. Because after that, I was like, oh, that must be the thing that my mom is talking to. Like, that must be what's going on. And eventually I kind of calmed down and went to bed. I felt that the thing I was feeling left at some point that night. And then maybe an hour later, I went to bed. I wasn't staying up. It left before I got tired.
Your whole family was aware of this phenomenon that was happening. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Wow.
The next thing that happened was the day after. So the next morning, I go to my older brother, and I'm like, hey, wasn't last night crazy? And he's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, the thing, it was in the field, like you saw it. And he was like, what are you talking about? I'm like, the alien-looking thing. And he was like, nothing happened last night. And so I went to my mom, because I hadn't told her about what was in the field. I was too scared, but I went to her. I was like, do you remember last night when you were like hearing one of them? And she was like, yeah, I remember. And so I was like, oh, okay, they got it. I was like, oh, what? Like, oh no, I don't want to be the only one. I remembered last night. Yeah. That's
wild. So you were just basically a teenager.
Oh, I was still in elementary school. Yeah. Oh, sorry, middle school. I was a middle schooler. Sorry.
Okay. And like your whole upbringing, was it just surrounding that, hey, these things, these entities, these creatures, these aliens, whatever you want to call them, they're real and they communicate with us? Like, at what point did you realize that your entire family knew of this and was aware of it?
Well, like, I think it came in like bits and pieces, because the inkling that I get from much more that I remember now is that every time an experience was about to happen, there would be like distinct little details that would happen first. So like one distinct detail is like if it was happening in the middle of the night, I assume my family, I would hear like a telepathic voice waking me up, being like, hey, wake up, we're going to be here soon. And so I wake up, and then the voice would be like, well, get ready to step out. Like, we will meet you outside. I'd be like, oh, okay. And so like in these experiences that I remember, it seemed natural to me. It seemed like something we just did. And I didn't really see my family acting like it was strange unless it was an experience that was happening without like a series of events in place. So like if we're all being woken up in the middle of the night by like a special voice, like that's a series of events. And so by the time more things happen, we're all in this acclimated state of mind of, oh, this is normal. We've all done this before. But if like something strange happens and maybe the series of events is incomplete or interrupted, then maybe some of us are remembering things and others aren't. Or maybe we're seeing things, but we're not remembering enough to recognize why we would recognize it. So that kind of thing.
That's incredible. And I know I mentioned Jeff Selver and his experience. And that's one thing that's one of those parallel things is that he didn't remember the events that actually happened. That's really eerie, the similarities there, and the fact that sometimes you just don't remember that the actual event happening, or a subset of your family didn't remember it happening. That's very unsettling.
Yeah, like I think the main reason I remembered seeing the ET in the field was because even though my mom was having some kind of experience that night, for whatever reason, like these beings were not trying to give me and all my siblings an experience. So I was still in a normal state of mind. And then I experienced something that was, very clearly not something that I would see in this normal average state of mind. I don't know why I remembered it so distinctly versus maybe other things that I remember now, but I guess it had to do with the circumstances of how it happened and what I prioritized as a kid, and like how I saw my relationships with my family. Because there were other events that I remember now that happened around that time where me and my siblings, like, we knew that we were like walking into a ship. We knew that we were around alien beings, and we were all calm, and we were all like, okay, this is the thing, we're doing this now. Like no fear, no confusion. But in the moments where there was confusion and there was fear, those were much more distinct to me, because as a kid, when you're experiencing confusion or fear from people who are older than you, from people you look to with respect and for protection, it means like a lot more when like they seem afraid or when they seem confused, because you're like, oh no. But the people who know what's going on don't know what's going on. No, I am very ignorant.
How frequently were you with your whole family when you were on these ships?
Oh, most of the time. So there were like experiences where maybe the beings would come for me and like one of my siblings, or maybe just me or my whole family. So I imagine there were probably experiences where they came for maybe just one of my siblings too, and maybe I was asleep the whole time.
I see. Are you remembering these experiences through regression, or are you remembering them like in real time?
Most of it is from memories that came later. Like I get little fragments of memories when I was like confronting the reality of these experiences as a young adult, older teenager. And the reason I say there was like 2 or 3 events of like, oh my gosh, what's happening in my life is because after that point, like, okay, I had this alien sighting. My family was acting very weird about it, but I saw one and now I know what they look like. And for some reason, aliens are in the backyard sometimes. Like that should have like stayed with me for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
And I never forgot it, but I actually went through periods where I just stopped thinking aliens were real. And I thought to myself, oh, well, I never stopped being able to recall that event. But when I would think to myself, oh, yeah, aliens are real, that memory would not come to me, as a recollection of evidence to contradict that. So, like, my guess, though, like I think I've been told maybe, is that there were points in my life where I kind of let go of what I understood was happening in a kind of unusual way, because it was easier for me to live life not holding on to those details and not fixating the reality that those details implied.
Yeah, that makes sense. Tell me if you think this is true or if this like resonates with you in any way. It almost seems to me that these ETs have an understanding of what consciousness is. And when you were telling a story about the alien in the field, which I want to get back to, I want to hear a description of it. But when you were telling that story and you said that your brother went up and saw it and then came back down and said, it's fine. I was getting the sense that they were manipulating him to comfort you, which leads me to believe that they almost kind of used him like a tool or like a pawn or something.
And that wasn't the first time that happened.
Really?
Yeah, I can't remember the whole experience, but I had a memory that came to me. Surprisingly, a lot of these memories came to me while I was doing trauma work. But this memory came to me where I was afraid and I was crying, and one of these beings was telling me that I had to do something. They were like, look, you have to do this. Like, this is something you need to do. And I was scared. I was like, no, I don't want to do it. Like, it's scary. Like, I can't do it. I can't do it. Like kids, in the way that kids do, like when kids really don't want to do something, like they'll throw a tantrum on the floor, like keep saying, no, 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 no. So I was kind of doing that. I was a little more composed than that, but I was like crying. I was upset. I was like, no, 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 no. Like, it was just like non-negotiable refusal. And so the being kind of looks at me and seems to stop talking. And I remember that the being looks at another being that's there. They seem to say something telepathically to each other. And I'm like crying. I'm like, no, 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 no. And I'm like, I don't know how much longer, but it was maybe 5 or 10 minutes later. My sister comes in, my older sister, and she walks up to me and she's like, hey, Snackie, it's okay. And I'm like, no, they want me to do this thing and it's scary and I can't do it. She's like, it's okay. You just need to calm down. I'm like, no, like I can't do it. I want to do it, but I can't do it. Like, I can't do it. Like, just really emotionally upset. She's like, it's all right. And she calmed me down. She's like looking me in the eyes. She's like, like patting my head. She's like holding my shoulders. She's like, it's okay. And so she emotionally soothes me and I calm down. And she's like, so why were you saying no? And I'm like, well, because it's really scary and I'm too scared to do it. And she's like, but it's okay. You're safe. She's like, the beings are safe. I'm safe. We're here. You're safe. It's going to be all right. And she's like, can you do it now? Is that all right? And like the beings, I don't know if they were like speaking to her while she was saying that, but she kind of looked at me and they kind of looked at her and then at me. And I was like, okay, I can do it now. And she's like, okay, thank you. But I knew that she was off doing something else somewhere else in that ship. And they had specifically called her because they could no longer like console me. I'd become too upset. Much as I love my sister, she never normally comforted me in that like very direct parental way. So I know that's not something she did all on her own.
Right. Wow. Take me back to the moment where you saw the gray in the field. I mean, I call it a gray, but I mean, you said it was a little bit lengthier, so maybe it was a different variant, but.
So like, I'm not exactly good at estimating distances, but if I I had to kind of estimate. Let me see. A yardstick is about that length, and that's 3 feet. Sorry, I'm counting in threes in my head because I think it was like maybe 7 yardsticks away. Could be 5 to 7 yardsticks away, and then that would be like, so maybe between 15 and 21 feet away from the house.
That's way closer than I was picturing in my head.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like right there.
In this field that was adjacent to the house but could be seen from the backyard, it was mostly flat, but there were piles of dirt towards the farther end of this field. And there was like a really broken fence that went all the way around it with multiple holes, and like some of the holes for the metal fence were upright, some of them were bent over, some of them were fallen. And so like it was super decrepit, super abandoned. Like the weeds could be pretty tall in there, but for whatever reason, one of my neighbors would mow this like abandoned lot every once in a while. So the weeds had actually been mowed recently, so they were about maybe, I want to say, between like an inch and like 4 inches off the ground. So the grass was very low at that point in time. And so as I looked across and I saw with the dim illumination from the window, I saw in the grass a sitting humanoid. And so one of the legs of the humanoid, as it was sitting, was straight up. So kind of like if you sit with your knees near your chest, your leg is pointing like straight up. So one of its legs was pointing straight up, and it seemed kind of pressed against his body. And then the other leg was still folded, like the leg was pressed up close to their body, but it was off at an angle. So it was kind of like, I want to say it was like maybe a 30-degree angle from the ground. So this tilted like leg. And so this being was sitting facing the house, not facing me exactly, but facing the direction of the house. As I looked at this being, I realized it was facing the direction of my mom in the house. And its head was also pointed in that direction. It had a big head. I knew that it was very tall because I saw the length of its legs. Its legs were very long. Like, when you sit with your knees, they stop at your chest. Like, this thing's legs were like almost level, like the tops of its knees were almost level with its eyes. Like, so these very long legs in proportion to how it's sitting. I saw its like very thin, skinny shoulders. I didn't see much of its hands because it seemed that its hands were folded down below it. But I saw that it had also seemingly long arms, at least the beginning of long arms. And so it was looking at the house. And this detail I don't usually bring up because people don't usually ask, but its eyes were closed. So it was looking at my house, its face pointed towards my house, where my mom was, and its eyes were closed.
That's not something you hear very often, especially when you picture grays. Like, I feel like the description I always get is almost like when dogs have their like third eyelid, kind of. Where,
Yeah.
But you're saying that the eyes were closed just like how a human's eyes are closed, right?
Yeah. And the eyelids were less distinct than ours. And maybe it was because, it wasn't perfect daylight outside, but it seemed like the color of their eyelid and their face was almost identical, and I didn't see many folds. So it's kind of like this perfect, like, covering of the eye. Like, it makes me think of, like, Asian people I've met. When their eyes close, there's, like, no wrinkles over their eyelid. It's looking at the house in the direction of my mom, and as I see it, I don't really see its head turn, but I feel that its focus is now. So in that moment, I comprehend there's a large humanoid in the field because I've seen where things are in that part of the field, the size of it. I knew it was taller than me. I knew it was bigger than me. I knew it was probably taller than an adult human being. And I also felt that even with its eyes closed and its face pointed in a slightly different direction, it was aware of me and it was watching me. So that was all super terrifying. So I froze for a second, then immediately ran downstairs.
And you said something too interesting there, that it was semi-light out too. It wasn't like it was super dark. Is that true? Like, what time of day was it?
It was late at night, and in that area there was a little bit of light from some street lights and light from like homes that had lights on. But other than that, it was pretty dim. It was pretty dark. I don't think it was a night with like much moonlight. Maybe it was. I don't remember too much. I just remembered that the light from the window I was looking out from, even if the alien wasn't in the direct line of the light, there was enough ambient light coming from the window that I could see it and make it out in the field with some level of clarity.
I see. And that was the first time you had ever seen an alien, right?
Yep. In that moment, from what I could recall, and then from that point onward, that was the first that I could consistently recall.
Okay. So you had this series of events when you were in middle school. It seemed like it was maybe like a 3-day situation here that was probably the most memorable for you, it sounds like. When was the next actual experience that you can remember? You had mentioned going into ships. Was that next or?
Well, to be honest, I have memories of going into ships before and after that point. So whatever was going on, yeah, like it was happening. I was just like not aware of it most of the time. But I remember that for a little while, well, actually, I guess at least a year after seeing ET, like all this ET related stuff just suddenly seemed super important to me. So I would like flip through the channels trying to see anything. And if someone was doing like a 60-minute special, or if someone was talking about Roswell, or even if it was like cartoon aliens, I was like, I have to watch it. I have to know. I tried to watch X-Files, but it was too scary. I was a kid. And so, like, it was super important to me, and I would try to talk to my siblings about it, and they'd be like, oh, Snackie, like, this is a very weird fixation for you. And they'd be like, Snackie, like, come on, like, they aren't real, or they're like, this isn't serious, like, Snackie, come on. And so, like, getting, like, not really a strong response from my family members, like, I kind of just put it on myself to try to figure all this out. Occasionally, I'd ask my mom about it, and occasionally she'd be like, "Yeah, there's something to that." And then other times she'd be like, "Oh, there's nothing to that. There maybe are aliens in space." I was so confused by that as a kid. I was like, "Mom, why are you like going back and forth on this? Like, this is not something you could go back and forth on." But I kept trying to find tidbits. I kept trying to find information, and then I think 2 years after that event is when I kind of like dropped it the first time, and I don't remember the exact circumstances. I just remember it was a pretty stressful year. And unfortunately, there were issues in my family and financial issues and stuff. And there was never a point where I mentally was like, okay, I'm just going to let this go because I can't handle it. It was more that suddenly it just like drops from my awareness. Like I was still thinking about things day to day and still like thinking about my life and what I like doing and, what do I want to do as a kid? But somehow, like, it escaped my awareness and it escaped my interest.
All right, we're going to take a quick break and we'll be back right after this.
Hello, this is Steve Burgess, hypnotherapist and regression specialist. I just wanted to let you know that my new book, The Adventures of a Hypnotherapist, is published at the end of May. It's filled with some of the more quirky, shocking, and funny cases from my long career as a hypnotherapist, including past life regressions, alien abduction regressions, and spirit release sessions. You can pre-order it now on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and at all good booksellers. I think you'll find it an intriguing read.
How many times do you think that you were abducted? Is it even possible to put a number on it?
I know that depending on my age and the period of my life, visits at certain time intervals were extremely consistent. As an example, because I don't remember all the specifics, but as an example, let's say like in a 6-month period, I have like visits 3 times in 6 months, evenly spaced out, right? What that actually means is that in that like time framing of like 3 equidistant points in those 6 months, I may have been visited like several times. And then it kind of drops off. And then that next like point in time comes up and then I get visited several times. So like maybe the first night and the next night and the night after that. And then maybe there's a small gap and then one more time and get visited. And then it kind of like calms down again.
So it's like episodic in a way.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's interesting. It doesn't seem like your story fits into this little mold that is my podcast, right? Because usually it's like one experience, but yours is just this.
It's been like consistent journey in that sense.
Yeah. So I guess one thing I'm really interested in is inside the ship. Is there an event or an experience that happened inside of the ship that could provide details of like what the ship looked like and maybe what they were having you do, things like that?
Oh yeah, like one thing that seems to be like almost like it's like carved into my subconscious is like the kind of generalized layout of the ships or the general look of the ships. From some experiences, I remember that I would be picked up in one type of ship, and then that ship would actually return to a much larger ship. And then I would enter the larger ship with these beings, and many things would happen in all of the chambers and hallways and rooms of this much larger ship. But both the small ships and the large ships had like almost identical architectural designs, and that would be that all of the hallways had this very curved look to them. Like when you look at a doorway, there's this rectangular shape if the doorway is open, like this rectangular entrance into another space. All of the entranceways in like the big ship were all rounded, not like perfect arches like you might see in like Europe or whatever, but almost like a kind of egg shape with like the thinner part of the egg towards the top. So like this kind of like beautiful, almost organic looking curved opening into these areas. And I remember that because I would look at all kinds of things when I was a kid. I was loved looking at things as a kid. I'd look at the hallway and I'd look at the floor and I'd look at the lights and I would just examine everything as I was like walking from place to place with these beings. And no matter where I was in the ship, all of the hallways, all of the doors, like all of the paneling, all looked perfect in the sense that if it looked like there were many parts to it, all the parts looked perfectly made, perfectly sized. If it was like singular panels, they looked like they were perfect molds, like there was no carving, there was no tool use, there was no like trim on it. The hallways were usually a very specific dimness. And so when you would walk in the hallway, you wouldn't actually see the light source. At the top of the hallway, towards the curve of it, on either end of the hallway, like on the left side and the right side where the walls were, you'd see light coming in from the top of the hallway and then light coming in on the other side from the top of the hallway. And so what was going on is that they had, and I asked about this is why I remember certain details, they had this specific lighting system. So these lights would be on, but by the time the light reaches the hallway, it's now dim, diffused light. So the light is traveling above the hallway into the little gaps, and then it diffuses down into the hallway below, into this very dim, consistent lighting. And so I remember I asked about why it was so dim so many times, and I was told so many times that they'd be like, well, our eyes are sensitive. This is a good light level for us. And I'd be like, oh, okay, that makes sense. In kid fashion. Oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean, that does make sense.
Yeah.
And, like usually animals with large eyes can see in the dark and they don't need a lot of light. The deeper a fish lives in the water column, the larger eyes it typically has because it needs to be able to see with not a lot of light. It's fascinating that they said that when you were, younger, like a child essentially. And I mean, you would have no way of knowing.
Like confirming that or understanding that.
Yeah. Oh, here's a question for you. The beings that were on the ship, were they all the same species, or did it seem like they were different types of creatures?
There were differences. In my experiences, what I remember the most distinctly is that there were like these very distinct looking tall gray beings and then these very distinct looking short gray beings. And I remember when I was a kid, I would ask, I'd be like, oh, is that a baby? Is that like a kid? Is that like me? Like, because I'm a kid, I remember they would explain to me, and sometimes one of the short beings would come up and explain to me, because apparently I asked this thing several times, this question, and they'd be like, well, we have like younger members in our group, and like the tall gray would explain, they'd be like, sometimes they're younger members of the short ones over there, and they're like, sometimes they're younger members of us tall ones, and they're like, but those short like beings over there, they are not children, that they are that size, fully grown. And I'd be like, am I going to be that short when I'm fully grown? They're like, no, you're going to get bigger. I'm like, why aren't they getting bigger? And I'd ask him, I'd be like, are they like kids that can't grow anymore? And they're like, no, that's their size. They're like, that is their size, just like our size is like much taller. And so like I probed them a little bit. I'm like, but like you told me like everyone is family here, so they're family. Why are they short if you're so tall? Like I'm like, I know that girls are shorter than boys. Like, is that what's going on? And I actually got different explanations at different ages. But the kernel of truth that they explained to me as a small child is they told me that the smaller grays were made differently and that they were made for like specific kinds of purposes, just like the tall grays are made for specific kinds of purposes. and that their short size is a part of that, and that's why they're short even as adults.
Whoa. That's a really, again, an ear. I got like goosebumps.
It makes sense. I mean, bees do that. They have like these specialized, like genetic, what's it called? Genetic expressions that create like these different versions of bees that do these different specific tasks in the same hive. In that sense, like the more I've remembered, the more I'm like, oh my God, like the bee parallels, the ant parallels are crazy.
Yeah, that's a very good. I didn't even think about that until you just said that. Have you ever gotten an explanation, or do you remember maybe what the purpose was of them abducting you and your family?
It's really funny because when I was very young, from the experiences I can't remember, because like in some ways it's more fragmented when I was young. But I remember that when I was very young and I knew that it was a night where they would visit, or I knew that soon I would follow them up into their ship, I would actually get really excited. I would actually get like very enthusiastic. Like I'd be really happy about it. It takes a certain amount of time for like toddlers to be able to speak with their parents. Like these beings were bypassing that because they were telepathic. So in a way, like I had actually already become comfortable communicating with these beings even before I began to directly use words with my own parents. So in that sense, like I as a very young child, probably as a toddler, I felt that they understood me and they were safe, and they would tell me, they were like, oh, we're family, like we're looking after you, like, like here's a game to play, like, oh, let's do this thing, like we're having fun, like here's a snack, so I saw them as like an extension of my family. Like when I was very young, I thought to myself that I had two families that were really one, but for whatever reason they were separate. And so during the day I had my day family, which was my mom and my siblings and big happy family. And then at night I had my night family, which would come and visit me, and they were very tall and kind of strange looking, and they could understand me really well, and they had all these things to do and see, and like I could see the stars. They would show me all these cool things. So that was like my very early understanding as a toddler. I was like, oh yeah, like this is my life.
Yeah, and that's interesting too, because when you're, it's like nature versus nurture. When you're that young, you're experiencing a pencil for the first time, or your whole experience is brand new. You throw in a little bit of aliens into the spaceship. I mean, it just all makes sense. It's just like you said, it's like a second family. It's not. We don't have our prejudices yet.
Exactly.
When I speak to other people that have been abducted or have had encounters, there's a sense of terror or
apprehension.
Apprehension, yes. When I speak to you, I almost get a sense of like wonder. You're just in amazement of it. And it kind of makes sense, because if you were exposed to this as a toddler or possibly even younger,
Yes.
you've kind of you have grown up with this your whole life. So this is nothing new. This is nothing scary.
Yeah.
It seems like they haven't hurt you in any way, or is that not true?
There were things that happened later in my life that were difficult, and I had to do like trauma work for it and like emotional processing for it. And there's nuance in that. But like in this very early part of my life, they weren't scary. They didn't do anything that scared me, and I trusted them just as much as I trusted like my siblings or my mom or anyone else I knew at that age. I remember this. I still remember it because I actually missed playing it, but there was this game that they would have me play. I don't know if it was like a 3D hologram or if it was a screen that would show me these things, but it seemed three-dimensional. I would kind of like hold something, or they would put something in front of me, and it would like give me this imagery of stars, like kind of like a 3D map of stars. So like all these stars in these very specific locations, like in this like cube kind of thing. And so the game, like the kind of like goal of this like little 3D display thing, they would kind of tell me in the beginning, and then later on they would just give it to me, and I'd be like, oh shit, I'm gonna play the game now. Was basically that I had to keep spinning the stars. So like if I thought about it, if I thought to myself, oh, I want this display to rotate like 45 degrees, it would. So I would start spinning this display telepathically, and the goal of the game was to find the way these stars looked from Earth.
Whoa.
Yep. And if I got it at the right angle where I could see like a specific constellation, then it would stop. And then like one of the grids would be like, oh, congratulations, like you found the way the constellation likes. And then I think I would get like a a biscuit maybe or something. Or I would get like, oh, we're so proud of you, good job. Then it was like it was a little like toy or game that was like teaching me star maps.
Did I hear you correctly that you were basically controlling it with your mind? Like you would just think moving it and it would move.
Yeah, and a lot of the like tools or toys or displays that they had were like that in the sense that if you thought an action and it was something that it could do, it would usually respond to your thoughts or your intentions or what you visualized. Like I remember a different toy they gave me was like it's like a clump of really small pink balls. So these balls would kind of stick together. So like when you would pick it up, it kind of give like this sensation of like Play-Doh, like these, these really small balls. They maybe be the size of like those small screws that go into like laptops or other electronic appliances. Like the top of those screw heads is very small. So like these balls were very, very small. Actually, now I'm thinking about it, I was a toddler. They're probably even smaller than I'm thinking of. So these very tiny, like pink little balls, they roll to each other and form like this clump, right? Here's the way it works though. If you like picked up the balls or you like focused on the clump of balls and you visualize something, the balls would start floating and they would assemble into that visualization.
Whoa.
Yeah. So like I remember Gray showed it to me and he was like, look what this can do. And I'm like, what can it do? And so he made it like assemble into some kind of round shape. I think he made it resemble Earth. And he was like, look, like this is Earth. And I was like, whoa. And he was like, now you visualize something clearly to it. And he told me all this telepathically. So I think I visualized like a rainbow or like a cloud and it captured it in stunning detail. And so I visualize a river with the bank on either side and it visualizes movement. So there's parts of these little balls that are the river bank and parts of the little balls that are the crests of the waves. And then as the wave moves through the riverbank, like the balls reassemble on the other side and continue to form like this water flowing animation.
That's insane.
I know.
I have to share this with you too. When I spoke to Jeff Selver, he said that he actually was able to fly a UAP with his mind, and he would look at this like star map, and you would, think of where you want to go in your mind, and then boom, the UAP would fly there.
It's funny you bring that up because I actually remember an experience like that. At one point, these beings were like, "It's time you learned how to fly one of these things," and I was like, "Oh man, it's finally here."
No way. You flew one of them too?
They taught me. I don't remember too much about it, only that they got mad at me as they were teaching me how to like psychically connect to the ship. Because in my experience with the crafts they showed me, the ones they had me practice with, the crafts themselves actually were conscious. They had a sense of awareness, a sense of autonomy. They had thoughts. They had like perception. And so like merging or actually controlling the craft meant merging your sense of awareness and your sort of like idea of consciousness with the ships. And it was very similar to like the telepathic conversations that I had with beings, because that was like, that's also a form of merging in a way. So I would kind of like merge with the ship. And then what happens is that your sense of self becomes the ship. So you're aware that you have a body and you're aware that the body's in the ship, but you're now aware of the entire size of the ship. You're now aware of the conditions outside the ship and inside the ship. You're aware of how the ship moves. And you know that if you want it to move, it moves just like your body does. So yeah, like I had that experience, and I remember they put me in a simulation, and I crashed in the simulation.
Oh, jeez.
I was like, I didn't realize the clip was so close.
Did they ever give you any indication of where they were from?
I remember I asked them this question probably semi-regularly, because I used to ask them like where they were, because I wanted to visit them on Earth. I was like, we live on Earth. Like, where are you? And they're like, well, like you can't visit us on Earth. We're mostly in space. And I was like, well, where do you come from in space? Because, you could be like, well, my family is from like this specific area on Earth. Like they told me that. So like, where do you come from?
Justin from the future here. If Snackie said Venus, I think my brain would have melted through my ears. Those that listen to the Jeff Selver series know what I'm talking about. Luckily, or maybe unluckily, she had a different experience. Let's go back to Snackie.
They would show me 3 stars that were in orbit together, and they would say, sorry, remembering it's a little intense, because they would usually show me this actually beautiful visualization instead of telling me. And this is kind of like par for the course with these telepathic beings. Like you ask them a question and they'll like answer with like a video.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like that's the thing that would happen pretty often. But they showed me this video basically of these 3 stars in space that were in a shared orbit with each other. So they were like all in each other's orbital paths, and they would point out the smallest star of the 3, and they would say, "This is where our planet used to be." And I remember a couple times I was like, "Used to be." I'd be like, "Is it gone?" And they're like, "Well, it's not gone, but we're not there anymore." Like, oh no. Because they would usually say that with like a hint of sadness, like they couldn't go back. And so like I would ask him, okay, where is it in the sky? And then they would like show me the constellation for it. And it's weird because like normally I think of the star Sirius because it's the brightest star in the sky. I know they've pointed it out to me before, but right now I'm thinking of Orion's belt. And like, maybe that's something I mixed up when I was a kid. Because they showed me a lot of constellations. But it was one of those. One detail I distinctly remember is that they pointed to one star. They said, okay, this star is visible from Earth. And they're like, this is the biggest star in that 3-way orbit. And they're like, and we're from the smallest star, which is not visible from Earth. So every time I asked them and every time they responded to me, they explained that where they were from is not visible to Earth, but that kind of like the solar liquid was visible from Earth.
Yeah, it makes you wonder, right? Because there's a big narrative out there that says that they're not here to harm us, they're here to help us. And they're also most active when there's threat of nuclear war or conflict or, things that could potentially destroy us. Could it be that they are from that star system that you described, and maybe they're looking at us and they kind of see the writing on the wall that, we might destroy ourselves?
Oh, yeah, they do.
And maybe they're just like trying to prevent that.
Like, I know it's kind of like late in the conversation, but like one facet of the experience that went hand in hand with like growing up around them was always being shown that they were precognitive in the sense that they could see the near future. They could predict things I would do or say or think very easily. And when they would speak about the future itself, they would say sometimes, I've seen this will happen, or this will happen unless nothing is done. So they always spoke of the future from the perspective of someone who is seeing it or who did see it.
I think everyone probably experienced that, where you're thinking about a friend that maybe you haven't spoken to in a couple of years, and all of a sudden the phone rings and it's them.
Yeah.
Or, just like these weird synchronicities that happen in life that there's really no explanation for it, but it just seems too odd to be true.
Yeah.
So I know you say that you don't really follow the UAP topic too much, but I have to ask this. Did you watch the recent congressional hearings?
Oh, yeah. I love following the hearings. It's a lot of fun.
What did you think about them?
Like in this weird way, I get this feeling of nostalgia as I watch the hearings. Like when I watched the first one, I was like, whoa. I was like, really? Is it happening now? Like, is this like the writing on the wall that things are going to change? And then when like the latest one happened, I was like super excited. I was like, it's a little disappointed at the end because I was like, oh man, they didn't talk about all the extra cool stuff, like the alien DNA and like the like the telepathy and the alien science. I was like, oh man, when are we gonna get to that? But it was pretty satisfying to watch. I really enjoyed it, and like watching the hearings because I saw bits of both live. I really got the sense of like history being made. There's moments in time where once events happen in whatever arrangement that they happen, they're set. They can't be changed. And I felt like the hearings are like that in the sense that like every word that's spoken, every question that's asked carves the immediate future in a distinct way, whereas like other questions would have carved it differently. So I get like it's kind of momentous that it's like a very distinct sign of changes to come. I'm definitely excited for them, but I'm like waiting for like the really juicy hearing because I have friends and people I know in my personal life, and like I mentioned to them like, oh yeah, like I've seen things, or oh yeah, like I love the paranormal, like in like that benign way. And I'm like waiting. I'm like, once I get like a really juicy hearing out, like I'll show it to them and they'll be like, bam, I'm the alien person, at least in the sense of like, I've seen them, I know them, they're my friends,
Yeah, I mean, that's it's really cool to hear your perspective of that, because I watched both of them live, actually, just because I was so fascinated by it. And
It's fascinating.
I gotta be honest, I was a little bit disappointed with the second one. And
Yeah.
I think the reason why is I had such high expectations of it. And I heard through the grapevine and just kind of social media that like there was gonna be some big changes with that one, and everything that they said, we all knew it. Like this is nothing that was revolutionary, but you're right. Like even though these things maybe were said on Reddit or 4chan or maybe YouTube.
It reminds me of when the Earth was flat, like in that period of history where like the most widely accepted idea of the world was that it was flat. Because during that period of time in history, there were still sailors, and like I don't know if you've ever gone sailing or how much you know about boats, but most boats are built with a crow's nest, at least big ones, anyways, because they know that at sea the first thing you see is the tallest point of another boat. And so in that way, like sailors knew even back then that something about the water itself was curved. It was a curved surface. So I think in that way, like, probably many people understand aspects of reality or details of reality or models of reality that are more accurate or more strange than the broad one we share. But that knowledge doesn't really come to the forefront until like authority or like mainstream forces or socially accepted sources of information confirm it or begin to speak on it.
Very well said. I love that. All right, Snackie, listen. I think we're almost out of time, but I want to ask you one more question. And that is, what is your thought on simulation theory? Because personally, for me, I've been doing a lot of research in the quantum mechanics and things like that, and watching a lot of late night videos on YouTube. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Like, I think that simulation theory has like really interesting, compelling points. The only reason like I'll really say like, oh yeah, simulation theory is my jam is because like I think that's like a little bit sad to put things in that context. Be like, man, am I like running on someone's Game Boy? Like, am I like a sim in the background? Like, that kind of diminishes meaning in some contexts, or diminishes experiences in some contexts. But I think that like in a broader understanding of like, is reality something different than the medium or the kind of like parts that we assume that it is made up of? What I subscribe to, I guess, is like this really consciousness-based theory. And in part, it's because I was raised with it. Because like during the day, like my day life or my day family, like I'd be told about like cars and gas and electricity and like toasters and sunlight. And then at night, like I'd ask them, I'd be like, oh, okay, like you say like this ship has power, like how does power work? And I would get all these different explanations and all of these like much more complicated explanations. And so like I'd ask them these questions just like I'd ask my parents. I'd ask them, I'd be like, oh my gosh, what happens to people when they die? And like the alien explanation was that when death happens, what really happens is a separation. And they would give me the imagery of like oil and water. And they would say, well, a body is like a bubble of oil and water. And when death happens, the oil and the water separates. And then I'd be like, oh, well, what's separating? And they would be like, the soul, the consciousness is separating from the body. And I'd be like, well, what happens to the body? And they're like, well, the body goes back into the state it always was. It's this type of matter. And I'm like, what about like the soul, the consciousness? And they're like, well, that's energy. And I'd be like, and like I'd ask them, where does all that stuff go? Like, what's like the cycle of it? What's the, like the pattern? And when I was very young, they basically told me that reality and existence is a sea of matter and energy, and that matter and energy, they recombine and they fuse and they like bond in all these different forms, all these different ways. And that the existence itself, like the universe itself, is actually so full of matter and energy and resources that all these different configurations exist and continue to exist and change and improve and what's the word? Continue to progress towards more efficient forms. And so like that was like very kind of strangely direct explanation of like the afterlife and existence. But then, like, as I got older and through like all of my experiences, because I had very psychic experiences, and now I do perceive like reality itself in this very different way from where I started in a more materialist mindset, at least in like the compartmentalization of like my day family and day life. Like I see reality and existence as fluid, as something that responds and changes and fractals in all these different ways. Because like my experience with time has become more and more nuanced, because like the more I interact with like ETs and the more that I ask them about stuff, the more my awareness of how things work expands. Like many ETs have remarked to me that time is a shape and that it is a multidimensional shape. Because they say, oh, humans visualize time as a line, start to finish. And they're like, no, it's a shape. It has many aspects to it. There are many aspects that can be manipulated. It's quite easy. And they're like, and because time is this shape, this linearity is an illusion. And that's usually their explanation for why they can see the future at all. They say that the future, the past, and the present all happen simultaneously and all influence each other simultaneously. So in that sense, like I feel like this incredible fractal kind of unfolding of existence and reality. And the way I understand it is, as your awareness moves through reality or pinpoints onto points in reality, it changes it in the same way that in the light experiment, awareness changed the way that light moved. Like I've had moments of precognition, and I'm not always able to change things as they happen. But when I see something happening that I knew precognitively, I'm like, oh man, there it is again. But time is an illusion. And it hits home to me that for everything that we observe and experience, there's even more happening. But that in observing anything at all, we're changing it, even if we don't see that or we don't know that. Because, maybe mainstream understanding, or maybe the science or the paradigm as we know it, or the like social state of things gives you nothing to work with or nothing to build off of or any reason to think that was real. But you experience something. You know something happened. You know that you have observed something, or you have been in a circumstance of something that you cannot explain, or you know is real, or you know on some level it's substantial. My best advice is find other people with that experience, find other stories. Like a big part of why I continued sharing my stories online, even though there is a kind of backlash to it, is because I thought about how many other people are in my circumstance, or in one worse than mine, or in one very different than mine, but with the same level of emotion and isolation and concern. We don't have to be alone, and we don't have to suffer alone, and we don't have to carry it alone. We can, but it's not good for us. We're humans. We're supposed to share things with each other. That's what's our strength. So look online and see what people say and see what experiences are, and give yourself a little bit of relief and a little bit of confidence in that you'll figure it out, and you'll find out at least what it was, or if others have seen it, experienced it, or known it, because you're owed that. You're owed knowing that somewhere else in the sea that is humanity, you're not alone in what you know, or what you've experienced, or what you've seen. We're human, and we observe things all the time. We observe a shared reality. So if you've seen anything, someone else has seen it. I hope that gives comfort and inspiration and a little bit of community, because I know that in these moments, that's what everyone needs the most.
All right. That was Forbidden Snackie, sharing a story that's not just about strange visitors or missing time, but about identity, memory, and the way these experiences seem to weave their way through someone's whole life. And honestly, stories like hers make you wonder if there's something bigger going on that connects all of this. Not in some obvious way, but in a quiet, almost hidden thread that a lot of people are starting to tug on. If parts of her story felt familiar, or if they stirred something in you, whether it's wonder, fear, or recognition, I hope you'll sit with that for a while. That's what this show is all about, after all. Not offering answers, but opening the door to better questions. Special thanks to Forbidden Snackie, whoever you are, for sharing your story. I hope everyone enjoyed it. This episode was hosted, edited, and produced by Justin Gearhart, mixed and mastered by Brett Jarvis. If you or someone you know has a story to share, feel free to email me at stories@closeencounterclub.com. We're always looking for good, juicy stories to share. And I do have one special request for those of you that are still listening. If you can share this show with one person that you think would like it, it would mean the world to us. And if you're new here, please leave us a comment on Instagram or TikTok. I love reading them and I love interacting with all of you. So keep it up. Thank you all for staying to the end, and you've been listening to the Close Encounter Club.